Welcome everyone to today's deep dive. I want you to picture something that probably happened to you recently, maybe even this morning.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
Right. So you're scrolling through a news feed, your thumb is just on autopilot, and you stop on a headline. It's inflammatory.
Always is.
Someone from a really specific social group, maybe a billionaire tech mogul, or maybe a person on government assistance has done something objectively bad, and you don't even need to read the article to know exactly what the comment section looks like.
It's the digital town square, but everyone brought pitchforks instead of conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely predictable. If it's the billionaire, the comments are instant. Eat the rich, they're all sociopaths, money creates monsters.
And if it's the person in poverty, the script flips, but the venom is exactly the same. Lazy, drained on the system, this is why they stay poor.
And if you look closely at those comments, you notice something fascinating. Almost no one is actually talking about Steve the CEO or Mike the unemployed guy.
Right. They're putting an entire demographic on trial.
And that is the hook for today. We've got a really interesting stack of research here, ranging from social psychology papers to some fairly heavy existential philosophy, and we're going to synthesize all of it for you.
Yeah, the sources we're pulling from today suggest this isn't just internet trolling, it's actually a defense mechanism.
We are addicted to labeling because the alternative is actually terrifying.
It really is. The mission for our deep dive today is to explore why we divide the world into us versus them, the mechanics behind it, and, well, the existential crisis that happens when we realize that every single social class has a dark side.
And more importantly, the crisis of having to look at the cracks in your own group.
That's the kicker. If I can shove you into a box labeled them, I just don't have to deal with the complexity of you as a human being.
So let's get into the machinery of this. We start with the psychology of why we do this. Why is it so satisfying to look at a headline and say, well, that's just how those people are?
Well, part of it is cognitive efficiency, sure, but it's mostly about identity construction. The notes here reference Jean-Paul Sartre, specifically his ideas around the gaze and the other.
Okay, wait, unpack that. The gaze. That sounds a bit abstract.
It does, but it's very practical. Sartre had this intense idea that when you look at another person, you essentially reduce them to an object in your world.
Reduce them to an object.
Think about it. When you see that billionaire in the news, you aren't thinking about his childhood or his insecurities or the fact that he calls his mom on Sundays.
Right, he's just a symbol.
Exactly. He is an object representing greed or corruption. By turning him into a statue, you strip him of his humanity. And here is the dark part doing that makes you feel more human.
Because I'm the protagonist in this movie.
You're the subject. He's the object. If I define them as the villains, by default, I must be the hero. Or at least I'm on the side of the righteous.
It settles the anxiety of who I am.
Yes. I don't need to define myself by my own virtues. I just need to define myself by not being them.
That perfectly explains why the judgment is so fast. It's instant validation.
It's a massive dopamine hit of moral superiority. The sources call this identity through opposition. You see this in sports and politics, even in office culture. Sales versus engineering.
Oh, absolutely.
The hostility solidifies the group bond. If we didn't have them to complain about, us might fall apart.
But there's a glitch in this system, right? The sources talk about the parallel conflict, or what psychologists usually call the fundamental attribution error. And I have to admit, this is something I catch myself doing constantly in traffic.
Oh, traffic is the absolute perfect laboratory for this.
Like, if I cut you off, it's because I'm late for a really important meeting and the sun was in my eyes. It's the situation.
Right, you're a victim of circumstance.
But if you cut me off, it's because you're a reckless jerk who just doesn't care about human life. It's your character.
That is exactly the mechanism. When we do bad things, we attribute it to context. He was under a lot of pressure or the system failed him.
But when they do bad things,
we attribute it to their nature. They are greedy. They are lazy. They are violent.
And this brings us to the philosophical heavy hitters in the pile. Albert Camus had a lot to say about this desire for clarity, didn't he?
He did. Camus built his philosophy around the absurd, which is essentially the conflict between our desperate desire for meaning and the world's absolute refusal to give us any.
It's a chaotic world.
Right. So he argued that dividing the world into good and bad camps is a way to create artificial order. It simplifies the chaos. If I can just say, my side is good, your side is bad, the world makes sense.
But the world doesn't make sense. That's his whole point.
Exactly. The truth is incredibly messy. The truth is that the good side does terrible things, and the bad side has valid points.
But acknowledging that is exhausting.
It's totally exhausting. Kierkegaard called this the dizziness of freedom. It's so much easier to just follow the crowd. He actually wrote, "The crowd is untruth."
The crowd is untruth. Man, that is a bumper sticker for the internet age.
It really is. When you join the pylon in the comment section, you're suspending your individual judgment to find safety in the mob.
You don't have to be responsible for the hate if literally everyone else is doing it.
Precisely. You're completely shielded.
Okay, but I want to push back a little on the idea that this is all just in our heads, because we have a section here in the research on systemic amplification.
Yes, let's get into that.
It's easy to say, don't judge, but the sources argue that different social positions actually do warp behavior, right? Like, the system applies real pressure.
That's a crucial distinction. We aren't saying everyone is exactly the same, and we're just imagining these differences. The environment, specifically, the pressure of power, the pressure of poverty, physically and psychologically scarps behavior.
There's a specific study in the notes that I think perfectly illustrates this, the Monopoly experiment. Paul Piff's work.
Oh, yes. This is one of those findings that I really think everyone should know about.
I can break it down a bit. They took normal participants and had them play a totally rigged game of Monopoly. One player was randomly assigned to get twice the starting money. They got to roll 2 dice instead of 1, and they collected way more bonuses when passing go.
They were destined to win.
Right. They were the rich player by design, strictly by luck of the coin toss. But here's what happened, and it's wild. As the game went on, the rich players started acting, well, rich.
They really did.
They became louder, they moved their little car or top hat around the board way more aggressively. They literally started eating more of the pretzels sitting on the table. And they even became rude to the poor players.
And remember, these were just normal, randomly selected people.
Completely normal.
But the context of unchecked power and advantage triggered a massive psychological shift. They started feeling entitled to their success, even though they actively knew the game was rigged in their favor.
And after the game, when they were asked why they won, they talked about their brilliant property buying strategy. They completely ignored the luck factor.
So, if we apply this to the real world, when we see a wealthy person acting entitled or dismissive, the research suggests it might not just be a character flaw inherent to who they are, it's a symptom of the position they occupy.
The position acts on the person.
Yes. Power creates a sense of insulation. It lowers the need for empathy because you simply don't need other people to survive.
And on the flip side, what about the context of scarcity?
It's the exact inverse pressure. Sendhil Mullinthan and Eldar Shafir did incredible work on the psychology of scarcity. When you are poor, your cognitive bandwidth is entirely consumed by immediate survival.
How do I pay rent today? How do I feed the kids tonight?
Right. This creates what they call a tunnel vision.
Which to someone outside the tunnel just looks like bad decision making.
Exactly. An observer from the outside might say, why did he take that payday loan? That's not logical at all. But inside the tunnel of scarcity, it was literally the only option that solved the immediate problem. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of bandwidth.
So, bringing Sartre back into the mix, he would say that while these circumstances, like the rigged Monopoly game or the scarcity tunnel, influence us, they don't excuse us.
That is the hard line Sartre draws. He acknowledges what he calls facticity, the facts of your life, your bank account, your background, but he insists on transcendence.
Meaning, you still have a choice.
You are still a consciousness capable of saying no. The rich Monopoly player could have chosen to be humble. They just didn't. Circumstances influence choices, but they don't absolve you of them.
And that leads us to the cycle of oppression, which is where the notes get a bit darker. It talks about how valid grievances can actually mutate into new forms of tyranny.
This is the danger of the righteous victim narrative. The sources discuss the dynamic between what we might call the intellectual class and the working class. Now, to be clear to you listening, we're just imparting what the research says here. We aren't taking any political sides, we're just looking at the mechanics of these groups.
Right, absolutely. Just reporting the dynamic as it's laid out. So what is that dynamic?
Well, you often see the intellectual class, people with degrees, cultural capital, feeling like they inherently know what's best for society.
It's the we are the experts, so listen to us vibe.
Which can easily curdle into arrogance, becomes a form of exclusion. The attitude becomes if you don't use the right academic terminology, your opinion doesn't count. That is a display of power.
And the working class reaction to that?
It's often reactivity. If you feel unheard and talked down to, you eventually stop trying to debate and start trying to disrupt.
You just flip the table.
And then the intellectuals look at that and say, see, look how irrational they are. It completely reinforces the divide. But the scariest part, and Canvas talks about this at length in his book, The Rebel, is that when the oppressed finally do get power, they rarely dismantle the hierarchy. They just flip it.
The source mentions the entrepreneur example here. I think this paints the picture perfectly. The guy who starts out hating the corporate machine.
He hates the suits. He hates the rigid hours. He hates the exploitation of the little guy.
But then he builds his own startup.
Right. And 10 years later, he's policing bathroom breaks and crushing union efforts. And the point is, it's not because he was secretly evil the whole time. It's because the mechanism of protecting his newfound power took over.
He became the thing he hated because he wasn't watching the mechanism.
He thought his good intentions were a shield. He essentially told himself, I'm a good guy, I'm from the bottom, so I can't be an oppressor.
And that brings us to the existential drop. I really love this term from the sources. It sounds like a ride at a theme park, but it's actually just a devastating realization.
It is the moment the floor completely falls out from under you. It's the moment you realize that there is no clean group.
Because we all want the moral shield. I want to be able to say, I'm on the side of the workers, so I'm virtuous. Or I'm a job creator, so I'm inherently virtuous.
We treat our group membership like a VIP pass to heaven.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about my personal ethics because I voted for the right party or I donated to the right cause.
But the existential drop is when you look around at your own team, the people you've been vigorously defending, and you see the cruelty, you see the hypocrisy.
Like the wealthy philanthropist who donates millions, but treats his waitstaff like absolute garbage.
Or the man of the people, who is generally kind but scams his own neighbors when times get tough.
Exactly. Two truths existing at the same time. When you see that, you lose the ability to say, we are the good guys. And that is terrifying, because suddenly you are completely alone.
You're naked. You can't hide behind the group jersey anymore. So I have to ask the annoying question here. If you are listening to this, are you using your class status as a substitute for your personal morality?
Kierkegaard would say this realization is the only moment you are actually alive. Until you separate from the crowd, you aren't an individual. You're just a fragment of a giant blob.
But stepping out of the blob creates intense anxiety.
Because now you have to judge every single situation on its own merit. You can't just use the cheat code of blue team good, red team bad.
It's exhausting. Think about the caloric energy required to actually listen to someone from the other side, evaluate their argument fairly, admit where they might be right, and then turn around and critique the person on your side who is acting unethically.
It's so much easier to just post the angry comment and swipe up.
Infinitely easier. But the sources argue that taking the easy way is basically a form of sleepwalking. You aren't seeing reality, you're seeing a cartoon.
So let's talk about what happens when you actually wake up. The notes call this real-world friction.
This is where the stereotypes just shatter against reality.
Right. Let's say you've been raised on the narrative that the poor are lazy and responsible for their own struggle. That is your entire map of the world.
But then you work alongside a guy from a really rough background.
Yes. You watch him clock in early, work 2 jobs, hustle harder than anyone you know, and he still gets hit with bad luck. His car breaks down, he has a health issue, he gets hit with predatory bank fees.
Your map doesn't match the territory anymore?
The cognitive dissonance is incredibly painful. You really only have 2 choices. One, you say, well, he's just the exception. That allows you to keep your stereotype intact. Or 2, you burn the map. You admit you were fundamentally wrong about how the world works.
And the exact same thing happens the other way. You're raised to think the elite are evil, and then you meet a mentor who is wealthy, but incredibly generous, thoughtful, and ethical in business.
And you almost resent them for it. You're thinking, why are you being nice? You're supposed to be a monster so I can feel righteous about hating you.
It totally complicates the narrative. Kimwa says we resist this because we prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths.
And the uncomfortable truth is that virtue is distributed randomly. It's not clustered in one zip code or one tax bracket or one political affiliation.
So if we accept this, if we accept that my side has monsters and their side has heroes, what is the new way of living? Because frankly, it sounds pretty lonely.
It is lonely, but it's lucid. The sources suggest a shift to what we might call the absurd competence. You accept the absurdity of the system, you acknowledge that the game is rigged and the bias is real, but you refuse to let it automate your morality.
Meaning you stop being a lawyer for your team.
Exactly. When someone on your side does something horrific, you don't say, yeah, but look at what they did. You say, no, that was wrong. We need to fix that. You hold your own tribe to a higher standard than you hold the enemy.
That seems like the ultimate test. It's so easy to call out the opposition. It takes actual courage to call out your friends.
And it requires nuance. Sartre's whole point about freedom being a burden is exactly this. You have to be able to say, I understand the context that led this person to act this way. Remember the scarcity tunnel or the power insulation we talked about, but I still hold them responsible for the choice.
You hold two thoughts at once: empathy for the circumstance, accountability for the action.
It stops being us versus them and starts being all of us versus our worst instincts. The definition of a person isn't their circumstance, their wealth or poverty. It's their choice within that circumstance.
That's the goal. But it requires you to drop the moral shield. You don't get to be automatically good anymore just because of your label. You have to earn it every single day with every single interaction.
Which brings us to the final thought to leave the listener with today. It's a question from the notes that, honestly, I've been chewing on since I first read it.
It's the question that offers absolutely no salvation.
Here it is. If you can no longer rely on your social class or your political tribe to prove that you are a good person, do you have the courage to stand alone with your own morality? And when you see the dark side in your own group, do you have the courage to admit it?
When you look in the mirror, are you looking at a human being or just another member of the crowd?
That's the work. That's the deep dive.
Thanks for exploring this with us. We'll see you in the next one.